Vitória, fecha esta.
Hello, welcome back to the Global Lives. And some of you who are here with us now might be aware of the Portuguese government's latest announcement of a new visa that allows digital nomads to stay or settle for a certain period in the country. It's called the Portuguese Digital Nomad Visa. This live here, we will hopefully answer to some questions with regards to this visa. You'll probably be asking yourself, how does it work? Who can apply? How long one can stay in the country? Lots of questions. But to help us answer and these questions and lots more, we have two special guests with us today. One of them is Joana Mendonça, Head of Legal at Global Citizen Solutions, and the other one is João Ascenso, Managing and Tax Partner at AAMTLegal. But before I invite them in and we start talking about the Digital Nomad Visa, let me give you some directions on how we will run this live. It should take about 40 minutes to get you through the live, including the Q&A at the end. But meanwhile, you can jot down your questions here in the chat and on the chat and speak to a member of our staff. And also, some of you will be watching us from Facebook, some from LinkedIn, and some from YouTube. But if you also want to join our conversation on Twitter, we are there with the hashtag GCS Global Lives. And finally, if you haven't already done so, please click the like button and help this video go viral, because it will help other people who are currently researching about the digital nomad visa. So, Joana and João Ascenso, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Whoops. Really nice to have you guys here. So let's start, because our chat box is really busy. We've got lots of questions here, so lots to go through. So let's start with the first question. That one will be for Joana. Joana will have a quick conversation here and João, and then later I will open the Q&A. So as you know, the Portuguese government announced a resident permit for self-employed and unemployed workers. Joining other countries in the world, we're also regulating the state of digital nomads. My question is, why is there a need to regulate the state of digital nomads? Isn't it simple just to go to a country and work from there? Or is it slightly more complicated than that?
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Gisane, for having me here. It's necessary to regulate, and it's a good thing that Portugal did it, because digital nomadism is a trend that gained traction and force during the pandemic. We all know that. And Portugal, like several other countries, already had visa options that somehow allowed people to live and work for a company based in a different country than Portugal. But it became necessary to clarify this issue, at least to avoid different decisions by different competent bodies due to the lack of specific legislation. Digital nomads, they have their own specifics. They are not the same as a textbook D7 living on passive income. This new framework allows them to envisage what conditions they must meet if they want to stay in Portugal longer than a tourist visa would allow. In addition, special care is needed with digital nomads, who by definition are people who receive income from their work abroad, which poses transnational taxation and social security challenges. And by the way, I think this is exactly the reason why we have João's valuable contribution here as a tax expert.
Great. Okay, so you introduced João, which is fine because you don't have my work. Fantastic. So now, can you give us, Joanna, what are the requirements to apply for the digital nomad visa?
Okay, so first thing, this visa is split into two categories, encompassing both remote workers aiming for a temporary stay of up to 1 year. So this is a temporary stay visa, and also digital nomads looking for a residence visa in Portugal. To qualify for the two types, either short stay or residence permit, one must meet the following criteria. I think we have a slide here that can help. Okay, so first one, be able to prove a professional work relationship with another country. So this can be employment contract, contractors, partnership agreement, or any document that proves the work relationship with a different country.
Okay.
Now the second. Okay, the average monthly income. This is very important. For the year 2022, it would be of 2,820 euros per month in the 3 months prior to the application. From 2023 onwards, it will be of 3,040 euros. And this is why it takes into account as a reference amount the minimum wage in Portugal. It says has to be 4 minimum wages in Portugal. So this is why the amount will change in 2023. Last specific requirement for digital nomad visa will be the proof of tax residence.
Okay.
Okay. Then procedure. It can be done through the consulates across the world, the Portuguese consulates across the world, or can be done through through an expression of interest to self in an online procedure done while you are already in Portugal. It's worth mentioning, I think, that this residence permit is similar to all the other options available in Portugal, namely in terms of rights and obligations. It grants civil residence only, which is the right to live, work, and/or study in Portugal. Tax residency and tax liability is not an automatic effect of having a permit to live in Portugal, as it is a matter that obeys to its own rules, and I'm pretty sure that João will unfold those very well.
Okay, yeah, looking forward to it. It's a bit of a fog here. So just to clarify one thing, because I think it's important, some of our viewers are joining us for the first time and are not very familiar with the topic. CEF is an acronym for the Foreign Borders Office of Portugal. Let me see if there's something else. No, this is really clear. You said it's a monthly, average monthly income. So yeah, that's great, very thorough. So thank you, Joanna. Now let's go, Joan, talk about the tax implications from the perspective of a self-employed or company founder who decides to apply for the digital nomad visa. What happens now with regards to tax and fiscal obligations?
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm very happy to to participate in this event? That's a great question, actually. And but let me start by give you a general taxation framework and then go to the specifics. I think it's important to understand how this works, how the general taxation framework works, so that we can clear our path for the specific questions you pose. We also have a slide here for explaining the scope of taxation in Portugal. Basically, Portugal follows the international standard and taxes residents on their worldwide income and taxes non-residents on their Portuguese source income. What does that mean? It means that residents are subject to tax in Portugal on all the income that they obtain, irrespective of the source and of the type of the income. Non-residents are only subject to Portuguese taxation on Portuguese source income. So, as Joanna mentioned, there's a distinction between civil residency and tax residency because it follows different requirements. So you can have a residency permit and be a resident for a civil purpose. But that does not mean necessarily that you are a tax resident, a resident for tax purposes. Although, of course, there's an interconnection between these two concepts. So we have another slide that explains what are then the residency criteria. There are essentially four, but the main two are the physical presence in Portugal for 183 days in any given period of 12 months. It's important to highlight, it's not 183 days in a given year, it's any period of 12 months, okay? So it's a rolling scheme. The second main criteria is having an habitual abode in Portugal, revealing the intention to reside here in Portugal. So we have two main criteria, the physical presence and the intention. So the fact that someone is a resident, if the digital nomads are coming to Portugal under a temporary visa and stay here for less than 6 months, they may not be taxed in Portugal except if they have Portuguese sourced income. For example, if they are being paid by a Portuguese company. But if they're earning income from abroad and their visa is a temporary visa, they do not meet the physical presence requirement, and they do not meet the intention requirement because they're already saying to the Portuguese government that they do not want to stay here on a permanent basis, but on a temporary one. Okay. Differently, if someone is thinking to stay on a digital nomad visa on a more permanent basis, they will eventually meet the tax residency requirements, which means that they will be subject to Portuguese taxation on their worldwide income. But it's also important to highlight that this is not necessarily a bad thing, okay? Because since we have the non-habitual residency regime, there are a lot of tax benefits granted by this regime, non-habitual residents, that we usually call it by NHR, that actually may increase the tax efficiency of the digital nomad. For instance, and we have another slide with the benefits that are available, and as we can see, all individuals that have not been a resident in Portugal for the past 5 years and move their residency here to Portugal may apply to this regime. And then the tax benefits, which is the second part of the slide. So it's valid for 10 years. And the main tax benefits are the 20% on high value activities, such as IT, engineers, etc., and some exemptions on certain types of foreign passive income, such as dividends, interest, royalties, to mention some of them. So it might actually be a good thing to be a Portuguese tax resident and combine the flexibility of the digital nomad visa along with the tax benefits that we have.
Okay, I see. I'm just looking at the questions here. Obviously, we're going to address them at the end. But João, I just by looking at some questions, there are some very basics with regards to tax that we need to clarify. So, and you just clarified what it is to be a tax residence, what is tax residency. So that's great. I think that's covered. I think some maybe not understanding that the income must come from abroad. So it's not 2,800 euros plus that you make from a work in Portugal. Please correct me because you guys are the specialists, okay? I'm just going through a few questions here. There's an echo on our end. Can please anyone mute who isn't speaking? So yeah, we basically everyone mute here. I don't know what's going on there, sorry. And can you apply when self-employed? If so, what proof would you need to apply? Yes, you can apply for self-employed, so we're going to go through all of that. And the proofs Joanna has mentioned in the beginning. And again, if you're not able to stay all the way to the end, do not worry, this live will be published later on our YouTube channel. So let's carry on, João. I'm going to pick your brains a bit further. When we talk about digital nomadism, a lot of people think about, the self-employed, the company owner or startup founder that is, decide to move to another part of the world and temporarily work from there. But which I think one of the greatest features of this new digital nomad visa is the fact that if you are employed by a company and the company is happy to have you working from abroad, you could actually apply for this visa. So can you explain how this will translate in fiscal terms for the company, for the employer, and for the employee?
Yeah, sure. So the tax and social security exposure depends a lot on how the remote work is structured and organized by employers. I would say that the main distinction is if the remote worker is under a labor agreement, an employment relationship, or is a service provider or a consultant, a freelancer. If the remote worker is under a services agreement, the regime that is applicable both from a tax and social security perspective is much more straightforward. They usually should be taxed in Portugal, where they are providing the services physically, and they are the ones responsible for complying with social security obligations in Portugal. So this freelancing option is an interesting option, especially if the freelancer develops a high-value activity under the NHR regime, which would allow him to be taxed at 20% in comparison with the general tax rates there are applicable in most jurisdictions, which are quite high. The 20% is a pretty interesting tax rate. If the remote worker is under an employment agreement, the situation may be a bit more complex. We're entering into a little bit of a gray area. And it's not totally clear, not even for the authorities, what obligations arise and who should comply with them. In any case, there is the risk of the employers having to register before the local social security and having to pay social security here in Portugal. And this is not just a problem with Portugal. And most multinationals, for instance, are aware of these risks and often impose limitations on employees that want to go and work remote. Of course, that also for employers and for employees, someone that have this employment relationship, there are some, let's say, some clean alternatives and some more straightforward approaches that we can explore. One of them that is getting very popular actually is the use of an employer of record, which basically is an entity in Portugal that you'll have your employment relation with, and that will comply with your social security's obligations. If the employer is within the EU, there are also some special arrangements that are possible to make between the employer and the employee. But I think that the most important aspect to do in these circumstances of the employment relation is to have an honest conversation between the employee and the employer, and understand what are the solutions that exist and that can be applied by the employer. It's important to have an analysis on the tax and the social security situation before moving to Portugal. We have a lot of clients that want to understand what will be their tax exposure, what are the risks for them, what are the risks for the employer, and then with that information they go to their employers and discuss with them what would be the best solution, hire an employer of record, develop a consultancy agreement, set up a separate firm to provide services. There are several options that we can explore, but it's something that should be done in advance and should be carefully planned.
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay, fine. So basically the bottom line is you have to speak to specialists, not only you, but your company as well. Make sure that you have all the fiscal implications covered. Right, so João, I'll go back to you in a minute, but I'm just going to pick João's brains further. Sorry, João. But still in the matter of tax, that is an important topic that we have to explore, which is in the case of Americans, because they have a particular circumstance when it comes to taxes. So what happens if an American citizen applies for the digital nomad visa? Do they need to pay taxes in Portugal and as well as in the US?
Yeah, so basically the general framework that I've mentioned also applies to everyone, including U.S. citizens. But it's true, the case of U.S. citizens is a tough one, because the United States apply taxes based on their citizenship and not based on residency. And while the NHR regime can be very tax efficient for other nationalities, in the case of U.S. citizens, what we try is to use the NHR to eliminate double taxation in a more efficient manner. One thing that I believe it's important to clarify is that U.S. citizens should never be subject to double taxation, because we have a double tax treaty in place between Portugal and the United States. What we're trying to do is using the NHR to simplify the tax returns and mitigate the risks, and avoid that with the foreign tax credit mechanism, you end up by paying higher taxes in Portugal or in the US. So we cannot say that US citizens are exempt in Portugal, because the NHR exemptions are not automatic and depend significantly on the type of income that is obtained by someone. And but what we can say is that even though this is not a risk-free situation, from a practical perspective, it is possible to obtain an exemption on salaries, for instance, or provision of services, as long as the individual is taxed in the US. Okay, but this should always be confirmed on a case-by-case basis. And for us, it is very important that our clients get the full picture of their taxation and the risks that are involved. And again, talking to an expert may help with the tax planning and make the best out of the NHR exemptions that are being applied. Maybe receiving a salary could be a good solution, but maybe there are other solutions that could be considered depending on the specific situation of the client.
Okay, and so now I'm going to ask Joanna, based on your experience, Joanna, with American clients, is there anything, any other relevant concerns about the digital nomad visa?
Yes, I would say so. I would say there's a big challenge that US citizens face, and it is the exit tax. In case of relinquish of US nationality, there will be an exit tax at the federal level. The same applies to some green card holders, not all of them, but if they decide to relocate to another country, they might be subject to exit tax. On the state level, some states apply taxes and others don't. So when relocating, even if you're not giving up your nationality, some states make this change more difficult than others with an exit tax. So what is there to retain and keep in mind is a red flag saying, if I am relocating, especially from the US, I have to plan ahead and assess in due time what the fiscal impact of this change will be and take options that contribute to my tax efficiency.
Sorry. Okay. So the tax exit is an important element the US citizens need to look at. And okay, fine. So still on the topic of what else needs to be factored in when an applicant is deciding whether to go for a digital nomad visa. And also to remind you, our viewers, the applications can be accepted from the 30th of October. I don't think this information has been shared yet. Are we still waiting for more clarification from the Portuguese government? Because this has been announced basically a couple of weeks ago, a couple of days ago. Is there anything else that we still need to wait to hear from the government, João?
I mean, there are several things that this new law did not clarify. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that they would be clarified in the following months. But in my view, I think that the most important aspect that this law fails to deliver is the uncertainty and the high costs associated with Social Security. All countries are trying to compete in attracting high qualified professionals. So if we really want remote workers to come to Portugal, we have to offer them competitive conditions and above all some certainty of what will be the regime that is applicable. And I think this is particularly important in regards to Social Security. This law failed to clarify the Social Security situation of employees and employers. And a lot of companies and employees do not want to take any risks and do not want to give up on their labor agreements that grant them access to some employee benefits, etc. So another aspect is the Social Security costs that are extremely high, as we know. So the question basically is does it make sense to grant a 20% flat tax and then ask for the payment of 21% for Social Security for freelancers? I know that the 21% does not apply on the 100%, and the effective tax rate is lower than this. But it seems that sometimes we are the government is giving with one hand and taking with another. Another issue that I think that it's important to understand, and this we could have more information in the following months, is the issuance of automatic tax identification numbers. We also call them NIFs. This is a measure to expedite the processes. So it seems a good one, but we do not know if the NIFs, the tax identification number, are going to be issued as residents or as non-residents. The last experience that we had for automatic NIFs, the individuals were actually registered as tax residents, which means paying taxes from that moment onwards. And this is something that takes the opportunity for adapting and to make your tax planning and actually segregate the moment from which you leave your country of origin and stop paying taxes there and move to Portugal and start paying taxes here. So until we have some clarification on how these automatic NIFs would be issued, I would be careful, and I would definitely choose to issue the NIF through the old traditional way and ask for a NIF as a non-resident, and then eventually, when things are ready and ready to go, to move on, then change the residency to Portugal and have this time to adapt, to plan, and to prepare.
Okay, so the fast track identification, tax identification number might not be as beneficial as one may think so. So I'd say, yeah, thank you very much. This was a very candid review of what is still what we still we're still waiting for in terms of information from the Portuguese government. And how about you, Joana? What do you think we still need to clarify in terms of this newly announced visa?
I have to admit that I agree with João and I share the same concerns. The wording of either the law or the regulation did not go far enough to provide a complete and functional framework. There are some loose ends, which I think we will end up filling with the practice of the consulates and SEF. Others will have to be framed by the interpretation that the tax authority and the Social Security may have on this. So I have concerns. I'm concerned that a specific provision has not been written for the residence permit itself and for the renewal of digital nomads, which makes them subject to the supplementary regime, which, being more generic, also implies more discretion in its application. I'm concerned about the lack of assertiveness and solutions on the subject of taxation and the total omission about Social Security with all the consequences that this entails. I'm concerned that we are allowing the expression of interest in this type of visa when anyone who is in the immigration market in Portugal knows that the expression of interest is a procedure that is completely blocked right now. But even so, I'm very happy to see digital nomads duly framed in the foreigners law. But I think that with the experience that we have in this industry, we could have an extraordinary program, a real breakthrough, but we were left with the minimum legitimacy for the procedure to exist. So practice will eventually fill the gaps in the process, and thankfully we will be a part of it. Okay,
that's a bit more positive, but I do I do share your concerns, yours and João's concerns, and they're valid. And but it's still a very good to see Portugal coming forward with the digital nomad framework. So now to wrap up this first step of our live, I'd like to ask you, Joana, why Portugal has increasingly been offering opportunities for digital nomads. And I'd like to talk about the example of Madeira's very successful model, a digital nomad village that was opened in September 2020. For those who are not very familiar with Portugal's geography, there are two autonomous islands. One of them is Madeira. Anyway, so it's part of Portugal. So, Joana, why Portugal is such a popular hub with digital nomads?
Portugal has in many ways set itself apart as being the ultimate digital nomad destination, ticking all the boxes that remote workers are looking for. And Madeira's digital nomad village is a prime example of this. Simply put, I think the country has everything that digital nomads are looking for: great climate, a wide array of activities on offer, beautiful landscapes and beaches, very affordable cost of living. And in recent years, countless co-working spaces have opened their doors here, so thus attracting expats from the world over. Also, the country's strategic location, it's incredibly easy to jump on a plane and explore other European cities. And obviously the fact that Portuguese are incredibly welcoming and they have an excellent command of the English language. I think this is an added bonus for sure.
Okay. Aren't you forgetting something?
I don't know.
The custard tart?
Oh, of course, the custard tart. Not only the custard tart, the food in general. But
Yeah.
yes, I had a custard tart this morning just to help me through the day.
And how about you, João? Is there anything else that you want to add from Portuguese culture that is definitely something to attract traditional nomads? Vinho Verde?
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things about Portugal is that we are European, but have some specificities in our culture, and the Vinho Verde is a good example of that. So we are great wine producers, but our wine is different from the rest of the Mediterranean. We have great olive oil, but the olive oil is different from the rest of the Mediterranean. We have great food, but it's different from the rest of the Mediterranean. So I think a lot of people are fall in love because of these perks and these specific characteristics that Portugal has, and it definitely has the opportunity to offer a great lifestyle, and I think that the government is trying to make an effort to increase the attractiveness of Portugal by creating these visas, by creating some tax regimes that are beneficial. I think we could go a bit further. But I mean, we still offer very, very competitive conditions in comparison with other countries, and we do have a very interesting lifestyle that attracts a lot of people worldwide. Definitely.
Couldn't agree more. It is a great country. Okay, so we now reached the end of the first stage of our life, and I am going to throw some questions at you and Joanna, and I must say our chat is booming. There's just so many questions here, very interesting ones. But we don't have time to answer all of them. So what I will do, I'll summarize with the help of our production team, summarize a few questions into a couple of topics, okay? And one that's been repeated all over here is the D7. So it's about, people want to know how the digital nomad visa differentiates itself from the D7. Is the D7 still available to remote workers? Can you compare this with the D7? Let me see if there's just another element of the D7 that I'm not covering here. No. Okay, Joanna, go for it. Can you give us a lowdown on that?
Yes, sure. I think we can add something I've seen in these questions a lot to the family reunification issue. I think we can add in the same answer. So, digital nomad visa is a regular visa, like the D7 or the D2 or the D3. It allows to travel within Schengen, allows to bring your family, because family reunification obeys to specific rules of family reunification. So the same rules will apply. In terms of differences between one and the other, as I said in the beginning, the D7 until now was the option for remote workers. Even though this D7 is designed for passive income, the consulates accepted this trend, and they were issuing visas for people living on active income too. I think it doesn't make sense that this will will maintain. The D7, I believe, will no longer apply to any remote workers. So D7 will be only for people living on passive income. Because it doesn't make sense if you have a specific visa for remote workers, it doesn't make sense to grant them visas through the D7 which aims specifically to passive income. So the difference would be in the requirements, because in terms of rights and obligations, it will be the same. And also, I also saw a question about the stay requirement. It's a general requirement for every visa besides the golden visa, not to be absent from the country for more than 6 months in a row or 8 months total. So this connects with the explanations that João already gave, that civil residence through a regular visa D1, D2, D7 will imply tax residency, because in order to maintain this kind of visa, you will need to stay for more than 6 months in the country, and you will fulfill the criteria of the 183 days for sure.
Okay. More questions here on the dependents. Are dependents covered under the digital nomad visa? Spouse, children, etc.
No, just like I said, the family reunification is a specific visa that applies to goes along with every other visa, residence visa available. So in order to apply for family reunification along with the digital nomad, we just need to comply with the requirements for family reunification. So prove the ties between the main applicant and the family member, and show that you have enough means of subsistence to live in Portugal. And also, I saw a question asking if they can be applied for at the same time. Now they can, because this amendment allows for family reunification to be applied for at the same time as the main application and through the consulate. So right now, by the time the consulate grants the visa, the whole family will have an appointment already in Portugal, a specific date to the biometrics interview. So I think this actually is a very nice amendment to the law.
Okay. Okay, so we covered the D7 comparison, we covered family reunification and dependents, if they are covered under. Let me ask, hang on, I'm following here the, can one start on the digital nomad visa and then switch to a D7 while in Portugal? Or would one need to return to home country first?
That's a very good question, and also tricky, because the D7 has to be applied for in the consulate and outside the country. But I think it makes sense if someone starts living on passive income to amend the visa and change from a digital nomad to a D7. So I'm not saying it is possible, because I've never done it before, but I believe it's something that we can consider, even though the D7 original has to be required abroad. I think that if someone is living, it doesn't make sense to ask someone to go to get out of the country and apply for a visa outside.
Is the digital nomad visa a viable route for residency and Portuguese passport? To cover that one?
Yes.
Yeah, you
yes,
did. Okay,
of course.
right. Yeah. Okay, so is the minimum amount, maybe that one for João, of 2,750 gross pay or net pay? It's 850, by the way.
So that's an immigration requirement. So I think it's for Joana to answer.
Okay, Joana.
I think no one knows. I believe that according to the way, to the typical wording of the law, if it was to be net income, they would say it. I will assume it's gross, because it doesn't make sense if it is net income, because of the possible variations due to the taxation that is over the taxation on the specific income. So I would say it's gross, but the law doesn't explain exactly how to
I agree
if it's gross or net.
I agree with
But
João.
it makes sense, right?
Usually for tax purposes, when they talk about values, it's also from a gross perspective always, and not from a net one.
Okay. Okay, so there's one question here. I'd be interested in hearing about the tax implications. For example, if the tax must be paid on income earned from outside Portugal. I think that's been explained by João, but maybe if you can summarize again, just some
sure.
points.
So basically, the digital nomad, as Joanna mentioned, you can ask it for a temporary visa, which is up to 1 year. Or you can ask for a regular visa, which is on the long term. So if you're going for this long-term option, you will eventually become a Portuguese tax resident because you will have to stay here for more than 183 days, and because you have a visa that shows your intention to reside here on a permanent basis. So it's not possible to escape that, to have these two, the best of the two worlds. So if you're not on the temporary option and you're going to the permanent visa, you will necessarily become a Portuguese tax resident, and that means that you will be taxed on your foreign source income. The good thing but that's not necessarily bad news, because the good thing about that is that Portugal has a wide network of double tax treaties. We have double tax treaties with most of the jurisdictions in the world, and according the standard of those double tax treaties are that you, in relation to the provision of services, for instance, that you should be taxed in the country where the service provider is located, which is a residency country, which is Portugal. So even you're being paid by someone outside Portugal, that payment should not be taxed at source usually. Of course, we have to check this on your specific case, and you would have to be taxed on that amount in Portugal. The good thing about that is that if you're going on a high value activity, that income could be taxed at 20%. There are also other more complex and sophisticated ways to do some tax planning, but of course that requires a specific analysis and depend on the. But the idea is this: if you become a tax resident here, you are subject to tax here, and if you earn foreign source income, you should or apply to an exemption, or be subject to tax in Portugal, or apply for a foreign tax credit to deduct the tax that was paid abroad into the tax that is due here in Portugal. So you'll never be double taxed, in particular if we have a double tax treaty in place.
Okay, that was really helpful. It covers a lot of the tax questions that we have here. Even someone asked about having a property in the country of origin anyway. So very good. I have a question. Can you utilize a digital nomad visa as a full-time employee of a US company, or would I need to convert to 1099 /contract? Joanna.
I thought João was going to answer that because he unmuted. You want to go, João?
Yeah. So no, I think that this is something. I believe that from an immigration perspective, you just have to prove a working relationship, even through employment or through self-employment, provision of services. I think that your option should be choose one or the other depending on the tax consequences of that and the social security consequences. So you basically have to understand what would be the best solution for you in specific. It would be to maintain the employment agreement, would be to provide services. It would be to have a structure to provide services and distribute some income from there. and how. So I think that that's where the tax and the immigration perspective are so valuable when put together. And I think that's from an immigration perspective, both solution might work. Then you will need to check and to choose what would be best for you, both from a tax perspective, but also from a personal perspective, of course.
Okay. We have loads of questions. I just wouldn't have much time. So I'll choose a couple here. Do we need to spend 183 days in Portugal or within the Schengen area? And how movements within Schengen area are tracked? That's one for Joanna. You don't want to answer?
No, of course, no problem. So that's interesting, obviously, because we have no borders within the Schengen area. So the truth is, lots of people travel within the Schengen area, and they're not exactly tracked. But the borders across Europe and Schengen area, they are working on a new system that will be in force, and I believe it will track better the movements. But the general idea behind Schengen is exactly to travel freely within the area. So it's a kind of hard to make these two ideas work. So I would say that you do need to. CEF will ask you upon renewal. They will ask you to show that you have stayed in the country, or that you have not been absent for more than 6 months in a row or 8 months total. So you need enough ties to show that you are in the country, because of course you can be on a D7 or digital nomad or D2 or D1 and travel a lot for holidays or even for business. So sometimes people, they don't spend the time here inside the country because they have business trips that require them to be out of Portugal. And as long as you can explain why you were out, it will work. Because what CEF wants to know is Portugal your home, or just an address you have to hold a card? That's the main issue. So this is the best way they found out to see if you're actually staying, if one is a resident or not.
And there's also some tax implications on that, because if you are saying to the Portuguese authorities that you reside here and that you're a tax resident here, they will tax you on your worldwide income. And if you spend your time in another jurisdiction, that other jurisdiction will also assume that you are a tax resident there, and will eventually ask you to, and may eventually ask you to pay taxes on your worldwide income. And there you have a double tax situation that will be very hard to solve and to overcome.
Okay. We do have there's one thing that seems not to be very clear here for the viewers. Joanna, you mentioned that the visa has two categories, and they don't know exactly what the difference is between these two categories and what they need to submit. I believe the submission is the same document, yeah, for both categories. But what one category entices and the other one doesn't. Can you explain that briefly?
Okay, so this is, as I said before, the wording in the law and in the regulation did not provide for a specific provision for the residence permit itself. So the requirements for the visas, short stay or residence, are exactly the same. But when it comes to the granting of a permit, it will be different, because the residence visa will go to the general residence visa terms and will require a lot of other documents, the generals, the criminal records, the means of subsistence, the address in Portugal, all the general documents they are usually asked, and the short stay will go for the short stay rules. So in order, if you're looking to decide on one or the other, the specific requirements for you to fit the profile are exactly the same. So the difference will be for how long will you stay in Portugal, and if you're staying for a longer period, you have to show more documents. That's to make it very easy. That's the idea.
Okay, I think now the questions are becoming a bit repetitive because people are joining in, and we answered before. This is the format of our lives, guys. I know some of you like, I don't want to know about why Portugal is doing that. I just want to know about my question, but we present the program first, and then we will talk about answer to all your questions. The reason why is because this will be posted on our YouTube channel, and then it will become a source of to help people research about this visa. So I think we've covered mostly everything here. It is let me see here. Now I'm going to ask this one, sorry, because I think that was the only one that wasn't really covered. Sorry, João, that's for you. How are dividends taxed if paid via unlimited company?
So that's a tricky one. There's no straightforward answer for that. So the straightforward answer would be this: under the NHR regime, foreign dividends are usually subject to an exemption. This is for sure. The question here is, what is considered a dividend? And that depends a lot on the type of company that you have, if it's fully owned or not, if it's tax transparent or not, meaning if it is a pass-through, if you have other shareholders, where the company is located. So using it may work, it may be a good solution, and it sometimes is. And we also on our tax planning, we take those type of things into consideration, but it's not something that I can say for sure. Yes, it will be exempt, or not. It will not be exempt. It will depend. The exemption exists for dividends, but then we will have to see a lot of the particulars, the nature of the company, the nature of the income that is being distributed, and we need to look at the documents to provide a final answer, and to highlight or explain the level of risks that are involved.
Okay. Excellent. And now we have to reach the end of this live. And I just want to say to everyone watching us that we are, tomorrow we'll publish an article on Medium, which will cover all the topics that we explored here in this live. Also, on our website on Global Citizen Solutions, there will be the ultimate guide of the digital nomad visa, which will be a very good source for you. And then, if we have not answered your questions here, so there's one: are you all Portuguese? João and João are. I'm not. But I'm a native speaker of Portuguese. So keep putting your questions there. Once we publish on YouTube, we will be able to answer through the comment. And that's it, guys. We have to go. Thank you very much, Joanna and João, and all of you who came to watch us. And I hope to see you in our next live. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Giselle.